So what I talk about today is going to be expanding a little bit on something that I talked about in one of my early videos. It's an approach to the topic where there's a position for each side, and I think it kind of neatly captures the value and the criteria, and then there's some research that you can do, and these are ideas that are fairly easily explained. And what I'm talking about here is I think that you could interpret the topic as decision-making process, that it sets up different decision-making processes against one another. Here's how I think you would do this. I think, first of all, on the affirmative, if you wanted to do this, you would say that the value is chosen for us by the topic, and the value is excellence. And you would say that because we are comparing competition to cooperation, obviously the excellence is not natural formations like, is this an excellent mountain, is this an excellent waterfall, but it would have to be products of human activity. And if that's the case, then somewhere along the line, the critical point is decision-making. Where was the decision to act taken? What were the inputs into the action that came from people's minds and people's choices? And then what I think you can do, having said that the value is excellence, the criterion is what is the best decision-making process, is you could then get into a couple of ideas. The first idea is groupthink. Now, groupthink, this term was coined back in about the 1950s, and by a professor by the name of William White, but the classical work on it was done by another professor from Yale by the name of Irving Janis, Janis. And groupthink, the idea here is that sometimes when decision makers are very cohesive, when they all really want to see success happen, and someone has an idea that they get excited about, if members in the group have misgivings and they notice problems and they see flaws in the proposal, they'll keep quiet. Because to speak up and point out the problems would somehow be disloyal. It would somehow break the group cohesion, and that can really be very, very dysfunctional. And problems that need to be caught in an early stage are not caught. So I think you as the affirmative could say, competition, rivalry, people arguing, people engaging in dissent. You could say this is the reason that we have political parties in the legislature, so that we don't fall prey to groupthink. That's one of the reasons that they're actually positive. And you could say that the inclusion of every idea, even the ideas that make people uncomfortable, that is what makes the decision-making process excellent. You could even point out that it's very common in meetings under parliamentary procedure to deal with certain matters by unanimous consent, but those are always the easy matters. They always deal with the very simple questions first. It is the tough questions, the questions where people recognize there is a difficulty, there are multiple appropriate solutions. Those are the ones where it is vital that there be vigorous debates, that people make the very best case for all the different alternative proposals, all the different alternative solutions, so that you've really exhausted the options and you really haven't overlooked anything that you should be taking into consideration. Now, a couple of issues that I think could go along with this. I also think when you're talking about decision-making, you could bring into it the marketplace of ideas. And boy, is the marketplace of ideas an easy thing to sell in a value debate, and an easy thing to sell in the debate world in particular, because it is the lifeblood of why it is valuable to have debate in the first place. So you could tie that to decision-making as well. And I mentioned that you could use as an illustration the adversarial process in the criminal justice system, because one of the toughest decisions we ever find ourselves faced with is how do we define a crime, how do we do justice to people accused of a crime without committing the injustice of convicting someone when they really were innocent, and then how do we arrive at an appropriate punishment. And there's a book, and I blanked on the name of the book, but I spent a little part of the morning going and looking for it. It's a little bit difficult to find, but you might find it in a good library. The name of the book is The Cloistered Virtue. The Cloistered Virtue. And an idea that is developed in this is the idea of the iconoclastic lawyer. And what the author sort of develops in it, the author's name is Van Niekerk, what he develops in it is the idea that if a lawyer is really doing their job, and if the system is really going to work properly, that lawyer's got to go all out. Not be polite, not sort of go through the motions, but, be willing to throw the furniture if necessary. Be willing to really shake people up to make the most energetic, most out there case for the lawyer's client possible. So, those are things you might look at on the affirmative. Staving off groupthink, marketplace of ideas, and zealous advocacy in an adversarial system. I think those are some really good defenses of competition as necessary in a decision-making process. Now, on the negative, what I think you can do is you can do a little bit of research into decision by consensus. Decision by consensus is adopted It's the decision-making process that is embraced in certain pockets around the world. Probably the biggest pocket is it's very popular in Japan, and a lot of their corporations decide by consensus. What this means is if a proposal is made, every single person in the committee has to agree to it. They don't vote. They don't believe in majority rule. And if there are, let's say, 13 people on the committee and 12 say yes and 1 says no, then the conversation will continue. They will try to draw out what is that 13th person's objection, and they will try to modify it or give that 13th person more information until that 13th person says, I'm comfortable. All decisions have to be unanimous. Another group of people that does it, the Quakers, in varying degrees and with varying approaches to it, they decide by consensus. And if you do some research for consensus decision-making, what you're going to find is there are a whole lot of books written. There's a whole lot that says that this is a very good way to decide, because what you wind up with is the support and the buy-in from everybody who's involved with the decision, because their concerns were addressed. Addressing their concerns is a necessary part of the decision-making. So then where I think you get to in the end game, if you ever had a round where it was groupthink on one side and consensus building on the other side, consensus decision making on the other side, is do you get to the most excellent decisions by bringing in all the information and considering all the alternatives and being comprehensive? Or is a decision measured as an excellent decision by its effects afterward, by its execution or its implementation, where consensus decision making would probably win? And the neat thing about this topic is just about every area that I'm finding, there are very good arguments on both sides. There's a very good starting position on both sides, and it's going to be very much about the end game. It's going to be about you trying to figure out how this is going to develop and how, in that last rebuttal, can you pull up out of the line by line and say, these are the tiebreakers. When you look at the big picture, this is why my approach to the topic, my framework on the topic is more compelling than my opponent's. So, decision-making as sort of the building block of excellence, I think has a lot of potential, and you might want to look into it.